It's now my pleasure to introduce Major General Donna Barbisch, United States Army retired, who will speak on behalf of the Vietnam Women's Memorial. Donna Barbisch began her Army career in the student nurse program in 1967. She's a Vietnam veteran, having served as a second lieutenant in the 91st Evac Hospital in Chu Lai, Vietnam, in 1969 and 1970. After a distinguished military career of more than 38 years, she retired as a Major General. General Barbisch was a registered nurse and a certified registered nurse anesthetist. She received a master's in public health and a doctorate in health administration and policy. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Vietnam veteran Major General Donna Barbisch.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's truly an honor to be here at the Wall to address the issues of Memorial Day and the service for those of you that served in Vietnam and the families that supported those. Memorial Day has a special significance, of course. And I want to thank all of the coordinators, supporters that brought this day to fruition. I especially want to thank the Vietnam Women's Memorial who asked me to speak today. And I bring greetings from Diane Carlson Evans, who spent 10 years of her life working to have that memorial set up. Diane couldn't make it here today because she joins the more than 300,000 Vietnam veterans who've been impacted by our exposure to Agent Orange. God bless you, Diane. I hope you are doing well today. Memorial Day. It's difficult to talk about death and dying. But certainly as a nurse, I've seen my share. 54 years, 3 months and 10 days ago, I arrived in Vietnam. 54 years, 3 months and 10 days. I was a naive young girl going to Vietnam to support our service members, because I had seen on TV the carnage of war and the loss that the United States was suffering. It was a tumultuous time, as you know. Many of my friends and colleagues wondered why I was going. But we need to support our men and women in uniform. I remember. I entered Vietnam and was assigned to go to the 91st Evacuation Hospital in Chu Lai, just south of Da Nang. My service started in the emergency room there. Being a brand new nurse, relatively new, I had never seen the types of casualties I would encounter. It was overwhelming. The corpsmen, my fellow nurses, taught me a lot about how to treat trauma, devastating trauma. In the emergency room, we had a radio that the dispatcher would be talking to the dust-offs, the helicopter pilots, our heroes that flew in to harm's way to pick up our service members right off the battlefield. We assembled all of the accoutrement you might imagine to treat a trauma patient. But when that radio would come alive, and I remember one specific day I want to share with you, the radio crackled, red, we were the red, to expect 20 casualties, multiple frag wounds, gunshot wounds, head injuries. People had lost their limbs. We were 5 minutes out, and I had to assemble the staff to be ready to greet these casualties. I could hear the whoop, whoop, whoop of that helicopter landing before everybody was there. My heart was in my throat. We needed to save these guys. The staff showed up just in time. The litter bearers ran to the helicopters to evacuate the helicopter, bring the casualties to us, where we were standing by with fluids and blood to resuscitate their lifeless bodies. We had more casualties than we could manage at one time. We had to triage the worst and make sure that we did what we could for the best outcomes. One soldier that came in was lifeless, unconscious. By giving him fluids and blood, stopping his bleeding, and resuscitating him, he became conscious. He looked up at me, and we were often referred to as angels because the guys came right off the battlefield. He started to talk to me about where he had come from, what he was doing. The OR was backed up, but we were preparing him to go into surgery. I talked to him, held his hand while we waited, as now we were just in the management of time before we could get the last of our casualties into the operating room. He told me of his dreams. He told me about home. I remember. He looked like my brother. He reminded me of home, something that we didn't think about most of the time when we were in Vietnam. It was too far away and too painful. I remember his face. I pushed that gurney back to the operating room, and I said, "Hang in there. I'll see you tomorrow." I retreated to my quarters, fell asleep, exhausted, and woke up the next day only to find that he had died in surgery. We discovered in Vietnam a thing called shock lung, where the lungs shut down. We learned how to treat them, but not in time for this soldier. And I have to say, it was one of the darkest days I had in Vietnam because I had to recognize that all my effort wasn't actually saving those lives. I am so sorry to that man, to his family, to those on the wall here that we couldn't save. It broke my heart, it broke my spirit, but I remember. I remember, and that's what Memorial Day is all about. We must remember. I feel like I failed at that time. It took me years to recover from that one moment, although there were several of them. We often hear about the folks that look us up. I'm out there on the web, and people call me and say, "Do you remember my brother, my fiancé?" After 50 years, they remember that their fiancé never came home. I spent the next 35 years in the Army looking for answers, learning, leading, and working toward protocols that would save more men and women in war and in crisis. I remember. I know you do too. I hope that our nation remembers. I hope those on the wall remember. I want to thank you all for your support, for being here today. To the families who lost, I'm so sorry that we couldn't do more. To all of you, I thank you for remembering. I salute you.
Thanks so much, General Barbisch.